Hello and welcome back to another episode of a Cozy Christmas podcast. My name is Art, and we had just a little bit of snow today. It was just a few flurries, but it was most welcome and has put me into a Christmassy mood. Today I've got part 2 of our story, Old Christmas by Washington Irving. We get his observations of Christmas Eve at Bracebridge Manor, and I think it's really neat to see you get the hints of some of the traditions like caroling, or they're called waits, W-A-I-T-S, here at the end of the story. You get some humorous observations of some of the different family members that are gathered at the hall. I find it interesting that he really wants to show how the traditions and celebrations that are being done are of the old-fashioned way, as the song says. It gives us an insight into how Christmas was celebrated years ago. And it still sounds as fun as it does today, doesn't it? Family games and parties and dances and food and gathering together. Just a really joyous occasion. So I'm looking forward to reading that to you today. But first, let's check in with Gracie. And again, if you have any questions for Grace you might like her to answer, send them in. Send me an email, write it on my social media account. Just get me the word and I'll record her answering your questions. These have been a lot of fun that we've gotten so far. And also, don't forget, tell me about what are some of your favorite Christmas foods. What are some traditions around food that you have? I'd love to hear from you about that. You can email me at cozychristmaspodcast@gmail.com. Now, these are all from Angela, who you just got a little necklace in the mail.
Oh, I love you, Angela. Oh my gosh, you're the best.
Yeah, you got a little necklace.
Bear pendant thing. Yes, yeah. So cute. Perfect for Christmas.
Ooh, I need to make sure to tell her we got that in the mail.
Yes, we received your gift, and it was very nice. Thank you.
Okay, so she has a lot of good questions here.
Okay, I'm excited.
Favorite Christmas memory?
Oh.
Oh, this. Okay, she's blushing. Do I want to know about this Christmas memory?
Oh, yes, you already knew about this Christmas memory. So, I don't know if any of you guys were aware of this, but as of Christmas last year, which is kind of fun, I have been dating a boy.
Wait, what?
Surprise! No, I'm just kidding. He knows, guys. So, we started dating on Christmas last year. So, it was the evening of Christmas, and we were just talking on the phone, and just, I don't want to get too ooey gooey, make anyone vomit, you know.
Oh, I appreciate that.
But basically, we were just talking about, our friendship, and I don't know, it was just all really sweet and happy memories, and that was a really good Christmas to begin with. Like, I just loved.
You just loved?
It was just a really fun Christmas overall, and that just made it even better. I was extremely happy because I had a crush on this boy for a couple of months, and so it was nice to get that, to have that happen on Christmas. It just felt like a gift that could not be replaced, that's the best gift I've ever gotten, and
well, gee, thanks.
I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry, but that's probably my best memory, is just that phone call on Christmas, and just it was just an amazing moment, and I was just thrilled, and I don't know, just now Christmas has a very happy resonance with me, just because it makes me think of that too, and I just always feel happy now around Christmas, this year I just am excited that we're reaching this milestone of, almost a year together. And I don't know, I'm just really, really happy about that. So, yeah, that's probably one of my favorite memories. And ask my dad, he's a great kid. So don't worry.
Really nice guy. I'm being paid to say that.
Oh, shoosh.
Just kidding. Yeah, yeah. Well, when it was actually before your mom and I were dating, it was on Christmas, over Christmas break at college, and she called me on Christmas Day, and I was like full of ooey gooey emotions, talking to her, and I was just thinking, man, I need to start dating her because she's just the most wonderful person in the world.
Exactly. Like, I don't want to go into details because I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable, you know what I mean? But it was all very it just felt sweet and like everything I had hoped for in a relationship. It's really been a really great gift that's gone and lasted way past just Christmas, you know. It just has such a big meaning. And anyway, thanks for the question. That was great.
So then let's see. What's a good romantic Christmas movie to watch?
Oh.
Do you know?
Did she ask that?
No, I did.
You asked
That's
that.
from me.
I'm not really like a Hallmark movie girl. Like I guess I can't be the judge of that because I haven't really watched any of them. But I should, but I don't know. But I know my dad was talking of one a couple of weeks ago that he saw.
Was that Meet Me Next Christmas?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
I need to watch that, yes.
Yeah. It's really funny. It feels like a Hallmark kind of movie, but then it's injected with the Pentatonics group, and like everybody, all these main characters are so super obsessed with the Pentatonics. It's like maybe more than a normal person would in real life, but oh well. They actually have some cameos in the movie, and they're hilarious actors too. The whole film was just funny, and every once in a while the group will be talking, and then they'll answer a question together in song, and their assistant was like, stop doing that, why are you doing that? It creeps me out. I don't know, it was funny. And then I also watched a movie called Hot Frosty on Netflix. That one is ridiculous and funny and kind of sweet. That one, a lady puts a magical scarf on a snowman who comes to life, and she falls in love with him.
Wait, that's so cute.
Yeah, it's weird, and if you think about it too hard, the whole thing just kind of falls apart.
Yeah.
Why? You know, because it was a snowman building competition, and all the snowmen looked like these, 3 round balls on top of each other, and then there's this snow sculpture of a chiseled guy, and that's the one she puts her scarf on. So.
And he comes to life.
Yeah, and then he comes to life.
Okay, and hear me out. I know it's not like romantic, that's not the sole purpose of this movie, but I think it's really sweet. I know everyone's seen this movie too. So in Elf, I love the development of Jovi and Buddy. Like, I think it's so cute and sweet and just silly, because I think it was really good for Buddy to have her in his life because he felt so out of place in the real world, I think. Just like being thrown randomly into it after being raised by elves his whole life. His life was very, very different. Life was very different out in the real world, And I think having her there was good and sweet, and it kind of helped him figure out everything without any judgment, exactly, because I mean, Jovi at first was hesitant, but I'm glad that the two of them ended up together. I thought that was really cute, just a fun little side part of the main plot and whatever. Especially because of how Walter at first treated Buddy.
Yeah, he found a friend.
Yeah. Aww. It was just, I don't know, I found it cute, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's our next question?
Favorite Christmas tradition?
I love decorating the tree, and it feels like every couple of our family just gets bigger, because this year we added in my boyfriend too, and that was fun, and then
my oldest son is
his
engaged,
fiance,
so his fiance came too. So we now had 5 kids and pumpkin.
Yes.
decorating the tree.
Pumpkin did a really nice job helping by laying in the way.
Yeah,
so
yeah. She will just lay in the middle of the floor, and so we all are stepping over her and stuff. Yeah, poor
and
doggy.
then just after we decorate, we turn all the lights off and do this dumb little dance around the Christmas tree while screaming random songs. And the best part is whenever we have new people who join us, so like for this instance it was him, who have no idea what's coming, it's always just funny to see their utter confusion and like expressions on their face.
Yes.
But that's always fun, and I just love Christmas being, it's not as much a tradition, just how we do Christmas, I just love it being cozy and more relaxed, I like having a looser schedule, just like going with the flow, and like, because it's not the same for us every year. It really just depends on what conflicts do we have, what else is going on. But I always love just the cozy, just calm feel to it. Like, we're not on a strict schedule. We're just all there enjoying each other. And the Christmas Eve feast is always fun too.
Oh, yeah.
Of cookies and meat and cheese and unhealthy carcinogens and
yeah, we play games sometimes.
toxins. Yeah, and the games.
We watch funny videos on YouTube sometimes
Of our family, or just like Christmas movies.
You know what you're saying reminds me of a quote from A Christmas Carol, which most things do. But in it says,
goes about with Merry Christmas on their heart, should be boiled in their own pudding and buried with a... I'm reading the Christmas Carol in English right now.
Oh, right. Anyway, he says, it is good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. And I like that quote, because it gives me an excuse to...
growing up's just not fun.
Right. It gives me an excuse to let my hair down.
Just enjoy childhood.
Yeah.
Because something I've seen just with the new generation is just like... Never mind, I'm not going to go on that rant.
No. You sound like an old man.
I do. I'm sorry. I remember when I was 8, and that wasn't that long ago. That was only 7 years ago. But the way that I was and the way that 8-year-olds are now is just so different. Like, it's so weird. It's just like they're acting like they're 25, and I'm just like, this is weird. I don't know what happened in the 7 years, but I don't know. But yeah, just don't rush your childhood, because you only get it once,
Wise advice. And that's why we have Gracie be
I'm here to be
the Christmas the advice column, she's here to dispense Christmassy wisdom to you. So
intellect, that's what I'm trying to think of. Be intellectual and
don't be in a rush to grow up.
Yes.
It stinks.
Plus, like, when I'm 25, you can sure as heck expect I'm still going to be acting like a kid when it's appropriate. You know what I mean?
When it's appropriate, yeah.
But, like, then again, yeah, sometimes we have to be adults,
It sucks.
Let loose, have fun. You only live once.
That's right. YOLO. Christmas Eve. It was a brilliant, moonlit night, but extremely cold. Our chase whirled rapidly over the frozen ground. The postboy smacked his whip incessantly, and a part of the time his horses were on a gallop. "Ha ha, he knows where he is going," said my companion, laughing, and is eager to arrive in time for some of the merriment and good cheer of the servants' hall. My father, you must know, is a bigoted devotee of the old school, and prides himself upon keeping up something of old English hospitality. He is a tolerable specimen of what you will rarely meet with nowadays in its purity, the old English country gentleman. For our men of fortune spend so much of their time in town, and fashion is carried so much into the country, that the strong, rich peculiarities of ancient rural life are almost polished away. My father, however, from early years, took honest Peacham for his textbook instead of Chesterfield. He determined in his own mind that there was no condition more truly honorable and enviable than that of a country gentleman on his paternal lands, and therefore passes the whole of his time on his estate, He is a strenuous advocate for the revival of the old rural games and holiday observances, and is deeply read in the writers, ancient and modern, who have treated on the subject. Indeed, his favorite range of reading is among the authors who flourished at least 2 centuries since, who, he insists, wrote and thought more like true Englishmen than any of their successors. He even regrets sometimes that he had not been born a few centuries earlier, when England was itself, and had its peculiar manners and customs. As he lives at some distance from the main road, in rather a lonely part of the country, without any rival gentry near him, he has that most enviable of all blessings to an Englishman, an opportunity of indulging the bent of his own humor without molestation. Being representative of the oldest family in the neighborhood, and a great part of the peasantry being his tenants, he is much looked up to, and, in general, is known simply by the appellation of the Squire, a title which has been accorded to the head of the family since time immemorial. I think it best to give you these hints about my worthy old father, to prepare you for any little eccentricities that might otherwise appear absurd. We had passed for some time along the wall of a park, and at length the chaise stopped at the gate. It was in a heavy, magnificent old style of iron bars, fancifully wrought at top into flourishes and flowers. The huge square columns that supported the gate were surmounted by the family crest. Close adjoining was the porter's lodge, sheltered under dark fir trees and almost buried in shrubbery. The post-boy rang a large porter's bell, which resounded through the still, frosty air, and was answered by the distant barking of dogs, with which the mansion house seemed garrisoned. An old woman immediately appeared at the gate. As the moonlight fell strongly upon her, I had full view of a little primitive dame, dressed very much in the antique taste, with a neat kerchief and stomacher, and her silver hair peeping from under a cap of snowy whiteness. She came curtsying forth, with many expressions of simple joy at seeing her young master. Her husband, it seems, was up at the house keeping Christmas Eve in the servants' hall. They could not do without him, as he was the best hand at a song and story in the household. My friend proposed that we should alight and walk through the park to the hall, which was at no great distance, while the chaise should follow on. Our road wound through a noble avenue of trees, among the naked branches of which the moon glittered as she rolled through the deep vault of a cloudless sky. The lawn beyond was sheeted with a slight covering of snow, which here and there sparkled as the moonbeams caught a frosty crystal. And at a distance might be seen a thin, transparent vapor stealing up from the low grounds and threatening gradually to shroud the landscape. My companion looked round him with transport. "How often," said he, "have I scampered up this avenue on returning home on school vacations? How often have I played under these trees when a boy? I feel a degree of filial reverence for them. As we look up to those who have cherished us in childhood, my father was always scrupulous in exacting our holidays and having us around him on family festivals. He used to direct and superintend our games with the strictness that some parents do the studies of their children. He was very particular that we should play the old English games according to their original form, and consulted old books for precedent and authority for every merry disport. Yet I assure you there never was pedantry so delightful. It was the policy of the good old gentleman to make his children feel that home was the happiest place in the world, and I value this delicious home feeling as one of the choicest gifts a parent can bestow. We were interrupted by the clangor of a troop of dogs of all sorts and sizes, mongrel, puppy, whelp, and hound, and curs of low degree, that, disturbed by the ringing of the porter's bell and the rattling of the chaise, came bounding open-mouthed across the lawn. "The little dogs and all, Tray, Blanche, and Sweetheart. See, they bark at me," cried Bracebridge, laughing. At the sound of his voice, the bark was changed into a yelp of delight, and in a moment he was surrounded and almost overpowered by the caresses of the faithful animals. We had now come in full view of the old mansion, partly thrown in deep shadow and partly lit up by the cold moonshine. It was an irregular building of some magnitude, and seemed to be of the architecture of different periods. One wing was, evidently very ancient, with heavy stone-shafted bow windows jutting out and overrun with ivy, from among the foliage of which the small diamond-shaped panes of glass glittered with the moonbeams. The rest of the house was in the French taste of Charles II's time, having been repaired and altered, as my friend told me, by one of his ancestors, who returned with that monarch at the Restoration. The grounds about the house were laid out in the formal manner of artificial flower beds, clipped shrubberies, raised terraces, and heavy stone balustrades, ornamented with urns, a leaden statue or two, and a jet of water. The old gentleman, I was told, was extremely careful to preserve this obsolete finery in all its original state. He admired this fashion in gardening. It had an air of magnificence, was courtly and noble, and befitting good old family style. The boasted imitation of nature in modern gardening had sprung up with modern republican notions, but did not suit a monarchical government. It smacked of the leveling system. I could not help smiling at this introduction of politics into gardening, though I expressed some apprehension that I should find the old gentleman rather intolerant in his creed. Frank assured me, however, that it was almost the only instance in which he had ever heard his father meddle with politics, and he believed that he had not got this notion from a member of Parliament, who once passed a few weeks with him. The squire was glad of any argument to defend his clipped yew trees and formal terraces, which had been occasionally attacked by modern landscape gardeners. As we approached the house, we heard the sound of music, and now and then a burst of laughter from one end of the building. This, Bracebridge said, must proceed from the servants' hall, where a great deal of revelry was permitted, and even encouraged, by the squire throughout the 12 days of Christmas, provided everything was done conformably to ancient usage. Here were kept up the old games of hoodman blind, shoe the wild mare, hot cockles, steal the white loaf, bob apple and snapdragon. The Yule log and Christmas candle were regularly burnt, and the mistletoe, with its white berries, hung up to the imminent peril of all the pretty housemaids. So intent were the servants upon their sports that we had to ring repeatedly before we could make ourselves heard. On our arrival being announced, the squire came out to receive us, accompanied by his 2 other sons, one a young officer in the army, home on leave of absence, the other an Oxonian, just from the university. The squire was a fine, healthy-looking old gentleman, with silver hair curling lightly round an open, florid countenance, in which a physiognomist, with the advantage, like myself, of a previous hint or two, might discover a singular mixture of whim and benevolence. The family meeting was warm and affectionate. As the evening was far advanced, the squire would not permit us to change our traveling dresses, but ushered us at once to the company, which was assembled in a large old-fashioned hall. It was composed of different branches of a numerous family connection, where there were the usual proportion of old uncles and aunts, comfortably married dames, superannuated spinsters, blooming country cousins, half-fledged striplings, and bright-eyed boarding-school hoydens. They were variously occupied, some at a round game of cards, others conversing around the fireplace. At one end of the hall was a group of the young folks, some nearly grown up, others of a more tender and budding age, fully engrossed by a merry game, and a profusion of wooden horses, penny trumpets, and tattered dolls about the floor showed traces of a troop of little fairy beings, who, having frolicked through a happy day, had been carried off to slumber through a peaceful night. While the mutual greetings were going on between Bracebridge and his relatives, I had time to scan the apartment. I have called it a hall, for so it had certainly been in old times, and the squire had evidently endeavored to restore it to something of its primitive state. Over the heavy projecting fireplace was suspended a picture of a warrior in armor standing by a white horse, and on the opposite wall hung helmet, buckler, and lance. At one end, an enormous pair of antlers were inserted in the wall, the branches serving as hooks on which to suspend hats, whips, and spurs. And in the corners of the apartment were fowling pieces, fishing rods, and other sporting implements. The furniture was of the cumbrous workmanship of former days, though some articles of modern convenience had been added, and the oaken floor had been carpeted, so that the whole presented an odd mixture of parlor and hall. The grate had been removed from the wide, overwhelming fireplace to make way for a fire of wood, in the midst of which was an enormous log glowing and blazing and sending forth a vast volume of light and heat. This, I understood, was the Yule log, which the squire was particular in having brought in and illumined on a Christmas Eve, according to ancient custom. It was really delightful to see the old squire seated in his hereditary elbow chair by the hospitable fireside of his ancestors, and looking around him like the son of a system, beaming warmth and gladness to every heart. Even the very dog that lay stretched at his feet, as he lazily shifted his position and yawned, would look fondly up in his master's face, wag his tail against the floor, and stretch himself again to sleep. Confident of kindness and protection, there is an emanation from the heart in genuine hospitality which cannot be described, but is immediately felt and puts the stranger at once at his ease. I had not been seated many minutes by the comfortable hearth of the worthy cavalier before I found myself as much at home as if I had been one of the family. Supper was announced shortly after our arrival. It was served up in a spacious oaken chamber, the panels of which shone with wax, and around which were several family portraits decorated with holly and ivy. Beside the accustomed lights, 2 great wax tapers, called Christmas candles, wreathed with greens, were placed on a highly polished buffet among the family plate. The table was abundantly spread with substantial fare, but the squire made his supper of frumenti, a dish made of wheat cakes boiled in milk with rich spices, being a standing dish in old times for Christmas Eve. I was happy to find my old friend, Minced Pie, in the retinue of the feast, and finding him to be perfectly orthodox, and that I need not be ashamed of my predilection, I greeted him with all the warmth wherewith we usually greet an old and very genteel acquaintance. The mirth of the company was greatly promoted by the humors of an eccentric personage whom Mr. Bracebridge always addressed with the quaint appellation of Master Simon. He was a tight, brisk little man, with the air of an errant old bachelor. His nose was shaped like the bill of a parrot, his face slightly pitted with the smallpox, with a dry perpetual bloom on it, like a frost-bitten leaf in autumn. He had an eye of great quickness and vivacity, with a drollery and lurking waggery of expression that was irresistible. He was evidently the wit of the family, dealing very much in sly jokes and innuendos with the ladies, and making infinite merriment by harpings upon old themes, which, unfortunately, my ignorance of the family chronicles did not permit me to enjoy. It seemed to be his great delight during supper to keep a young girl next to him in a continual agony of stifled laughter, in spite of her awe of the reproving looks of her mother, who sat opposite. Indeed, he was the idol of the younger part of the company, who laughed at everything he said or did, and at every turn of his countenance. I could not wonder at it, for he must have been a miracle of accomplishments in their eyes. He could imitate Punch and Judy, make an old woman of his hand, with the assistance of a burnt cork and pocket handkerchief, and cut an orange into such a ludicrous caricature that the young folks were ready to die with laughing. I was let briefly into his history by Frank Bracebridge. He was an old bachelor of a small independent income, which by careful management was sufficient for all his wants. He revolved through the family system like a vagrant comet in its orbit, sometimes visiting one branch and sometimes another quite remote, as is often the case with gentlemen of extensive connections and small fortunes in England. As is often the case with gentlemen of extensive connections and small fortunes in England. He had a chirping, buoyant disposition, always enjoying the present moment, and his frequent change of scene and company prevented his acquiring those rusty, unaccommodating habits with which old bachelors are so uncharitably charged. He was a complete family chronicle, being versed in the genealogy, history, and intermarriages of the whole house of Bracebridge, which made him a great favorite with the old folks. He was a beau of all the elder ladies and superannuated spinsters, among whom he was habitually considered rather a young fellow, and he was a master of the revels among the children, so that there was not a more popular being in the sphere in which he moved than Mr. Simon Bracebridge. Of late years he had resided almost entirely with the squire, to whom he had become a factotum, and whom he particularly delighted by jumping with his humor and respect to old times, and by having a scrap of an old song to suit every occasion. Presently a specimen of his last mentioned talent, for no sooner was supper removed, and spiced wines and other beverages peculiar to the season introduced, then Master Simon was called on for a good old Christmas song. He bethought himself for a moment, and then, with a sparkle of the eye and a voice that was by no means bad, excepting that it ran occasionally into a falsetto, like the notes of a split reed, he quavered forth a quaint old ditty. Now Christmas is come, let us beat up the drum, and call all our neighbors together. And when they appear, let us make them such cheer as will keep out the wind and the weather, etc. The supper had disposed every one to gaiety, and an old harper was summoned from the servants' hall, where he had been strumming all the evening, and to all appearance comforting himself with some of the squire's home brewed. He was a kind of hanger-on, I was told, of the establishment, and though ostensibly a resident of the village, was oftener to be found in the squire's kitchen than his own home, the old gentleman being fond of the sound of harp in hall. The dance, like most dances after supper, was a merry one. Some of the older folks joined in it, and the squire himself figured down several couples with a partner with whom he affirmed he had danced at every Christmas for nearly half a century. Master Simon, who seemed to be a kind of connecting link between the old times and the new, and to be withal a little antiquated in the taste of his accomplishments, evidently piqued himself on his dancing, and was endeavoring to gain credit by the heel and toe, rigadoon, and other graces of the ancient school. But he had unluckily assorted himself with a little romping girl from boarding school, who, by her wild vivacity, kept him continually on the stretch, and defeated all his sober attempts at elegance. Such are the ill-assorted matches to which antique gentlemen are unfortunately prone. The young Oxonian, on the contrary, had led out one of his maiden aunts, on whom the rogue played 1,000 little knaveries with impunity. He was full of practical jokes, and his delight was to tease his aunts and cousins. Yet, like all madcap youngsters, he was a universal favorite among the women. The most interesting couple in the dance was the young officer and a ward of the squire's, a beautiful blushing girl of 17. From several shy glances which I had noticed in the course of the evening, I suspected there was a little kindness growing up between them, and indeed the young soldier was just the hero to captivate a romantic girl. He was tall, slender, and handsome, and like most young British officers of late years, had picked up various small accomplishments on the continent. He could talk French and Italian, draw landscapes, sing very tolerably, dance divinely, but above all he had been wounded at Waterloo. What girl of 17, well-read in poetry and romance, could resist such a mirror of chivalry and perfection? The moment the dance was over, he caught up a guitar and, lolling against the old marble fireplace in an attitude which I am half inclined to suspect was studied, began the little French air of the troubadour. The squire, however, exclaimed against having anything on Christmas Eve but good old English, upon which the young minstrel, casting up his eye for a moment, as if in an effort of memory, struck into another strain, and, with a charming air of gallantry, gave Herrick's night piece to Julia. Her eyes the glowworm lend thee, the shooting stars attend thee, and the elves also, whose little eyes glow like the sparks of fire, befriend thee. No will-o'-the-wisp mislight thee, nor snake or glowworm bite thee, but on thy way, not making a stay, since ghost there is none to affright thee. Then let not the drink thee cumber. What through the moon does slumber, the stars of the night will lend thee their light, like tapers clear without number. Then, Julia, let me woo thee, thus to come unto me, and when I shall meet thy silvery feet, my soul I'll pour out into thee. The song might have been intended in compliment to the fair Julia, for so I found his partner was called, or it might not. She, however, was certainly unconscious of any such application, for she never looked at the singer, but kept her eyes cast upon the floor. Her face was suffused, it is true, with a beautiful blush, and there was a gentle heaving of the bosom, but all that was doubtless caused by the exercise of the dance. Indeed, so great was her indifference, that she was amusing herself with plucking to pieces a choice bouquet of hothouse flowers, and by the time the song was concluded, the nosegay lay in ruins on the floor. The party now broke up for the night with the kind-hearted old custom of shaking hands. As I passed through the hall on the way to my chamber, the dying embers of the Yule log still sent forth a dusky glow, and had it not been the season when no spirit dare stir about, I should have been half tempted to steal from my room at midnight and peep whether the fairies might not be at their revels about the hearth. My chamber was in the old part of the mansion, the ponderous furniture of which might have been fabricated in the days of the giants. The room was paneled with cornices of heavy carved work, in which flowers and grotesque faces were strangely intermingled, and a row of black-looking portraits stared mournfully at me from the walls. The bed was of rich though faded damask, with a lofty tester, and stood in a niche opposite a bow window. I had scarcely got into bed when a strain of music seemed to break forth in the air just below the window. I listened and found it proceeded from a band which I concluded to be the waits from some neighboring village. They went round the house, playing under the windows. I drew aside the curtains to hear them more distinctly. The moonbeams fell through the upper part of the casement, partially lighting up the antiquated apartment. The sounds, as they receded, became more soft and aerial, and seemed to accord with quiet and moonlight. I listened and listened. They became more and more tender and remote, and as they gradually died away, my head sank upon the pillow, and I fell asleep. Thanks for listening today. This has been a blast. Again, if you have questions for Gracie or want to share some memories involving food, what is your favorite Christmas snack or treat? Send them to me at cozychristmaspodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to support the show in a financial way, there are some links in the show notes. You can order some t-shirts, some other pod merch, and I think I have a few ornaments left you might want to check out. And then or any donation on Ko-fi.com, I'll send you a Christmas card with a bookmark and sticker. So with that, let us remember to honor Christmas in our heart and try to keep it all the year. Have a very Merry Christmas.